This is the Hockey News Prospect Podcast. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of the Hockey News Prospect Podcast. I'm Stephen Ellis. That's Ryan Kennedy. Ryan, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Let's do this thing.
All right. It's been a busy week for prospect news, both for international tournaments, international teams, but also just kind of there's some NCAA stuff to talk about. There's some really good players overall to talk about. And let's talk about three players that are currently catching your eye. My favorite part of the podcast. Which players are you thinking about right now?
Okay, so we'll start off with the US NTDP. It's been a very fascinating year for the American Hothouse program. You know, a lot of injuries, a lot of COVID protocol. So we've seen a lot of players take on sort of big roles at different times. And one player who I was just talking to a scout about the other day is Tyler Boucher. He's the son of former goalie Brian Boucher, but could not be more different of a player. Tyler is a power forward. And what's interesting about him, he's very unique in that it's hard to find players in that sort of Tom Wilson, Miles Wood archetype. And Boucher fits that profile. He just loves to like crush people out there. And the great quote from the scout was, you know, he has hurt himself while trying to hurt others. So this will tell you how much Boucher loves to mix it up. And obviously there's not a lot of fighting, in the USHL. And Boucher is committed to Boston University, and obviously there's not much fighting there. But I'm getting the impression that once he turns pro, we're going to see a guy that's going to drop the gloves, either defending a teammate or because he laid somebody out and somebody else was defending an opposing teammate. Also 14 points in 14 games. So a lot to like there from Tyler Boucher. Might be a late first rounder. The injuries might scare teams away, so he might end up being an early second rounder. Maybe in that sort of like Tyler Clevin, like a team needs, a different look, so they go with a physical guy that they believe in. But definitely one to watch for top 40. So fun one there. Sticking with the physical element of the game, going to go with Corson Ceulemans from the Brooks Bandits.
Great prospect.
AJHL team. For those unfamiliar, that's where Cale Makar played. And Brooks has been an absolute juggernaut probably the past 5-6 years, I would say at this point. I know, Stephen, you've written about them recently as well. But the AJHL is back now. Ceulemans has 7 points in 5 games for the Bandits. He's a University of Wisconsin commit. And when I watch him play, I'm not a big comparison guy. I don't like doing it.
Me too.
I see like a young Scott Stevens, a guy that you always have to know where he is on the ice. And what I will say is, like Scott Stevens now. So the things that Scott Stevens did back in the 80s and 90s are obviously illegal now. Corson Ceulemans does them legally, so he's going to throw big hits. He's going to say,
you say he does what Scott Stevens does now. I don't think Scott Stevens does a lot of anything right now. He's not exactly playing in the NHL, but
that's true. But anyway, so yeah, Corson Ceulemans, good defender. Obviously you can put up some points as well. So two-way guy, very physical. I expect him to be, probably like top 15, top 20 this year, just because it's a very unique skill set, and he's on a really good development path. I think that's something that, we don't necessarily always talk about is, how these kids are being brought up to the pro level. So, you look at Brooks and they have a pretty good track record of developing players recently. And then obviously the University of Wisconsin also has a very good track record of developing players. So if you're an NHL team and you're looking at Ceulemans, you're saying, okay, well, he's in good hands now. He's going to be in good hands in college. That gives us a big leg up in his development. So Ceulemans definitely one to watch there in the AJHL. Finally, I'm going with a deep cut here, but a player I'm very fascinated with, goaltender Ivan Zhigulov.
Yes.
He is from Belarus, and he played 3 games with Dynamo Moscow's junior team in Russia this year, had a 939 save percentage. And, Dynamo Moscow, very good this year, but 939 save percentage is obviously quite good. Then he is sort of regular team, if you will, is Belarus's under-18 squad, which is kind of their NTDP, something they've started in recent years. And they play against pro men in the Belarus Extra League. And Zhiglov still has a 920 save percentage. And it's interesting because some of the other goalies in that program have been getting bombed, particularly late in the season when the games meant a lot for playoff jockeying amongst the other pro teams. But Zhiglov, he did lose his last game, but it was only 2-1, and it was in overtime, and it was on a breakaway that, he got beat. And I mean, he was there, but the guy made a really nice move. Not a lot you can do there. Belarus is in the top division of the World Under-18s this year. So they're playing with the big boys, Canada, Sweden, Russia, USA. I'm very fascinated to see how many starts Zhiglov gets because, some of their other goaltenders, even though they're all the same age, have gotten more starts. There's a kid, Chayka, that's gotten more starts, hasn't performed as well. I don't know what the logic is there. Maybe they see something. I have no idea. But I would love to see Zhiglov get some starts at the World Under-18s because I think, at 6'3" with some pretty good athleticism, he is a very intriguing prospect to watch.
That's the thing. He's got good size. And after you mentioned him to me a couple of weeks ago, I started watching a lot of his games. And this is a guy that he doesn't need to rely on his size. He's very athletic, like you mentioned. But he's also very calm in the net. He's not like you'll sometimes just see these goalies who do rely a lot on their athleticism that are just kind of diving like me in NHL 21, just trying to dive and make every save. But in reality, it's he's just really relaxed. He's not diving when he needs to. He's a lot of fun to watch, though. He's an entertaining goalie. And it's funny. There's actually some elements of his game that remind me of Jesper Wallstedt, just obviously not at the same level. One's the top goalie and one's playing in Belarus. But it's still like, you know what? This guy he's calm in the net. He doesn't get out of position too much. And I like to see that of a goalie. So we did talk about the goaltenders last week or 2 weeks ago. And while this isn't like a super, super ultra strong goalie draft, it's still one that's actually a lot of fun to watch because there is good depth, and this is definitely a good find.
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting to see at the draft because just talking to scouts, they're looking at Russia and just how that that country's programs have developed netminders, and you kind of have to go digging around sometimes because there can be some big jumps up in development. But it'll be very fun to see, maybe some of those mid to late round picks. I think there's going to be a lot of scouts that kind of have a favorite that they've seen over in Russia. And, you're hoping you hit a jackpot, right? You're hoping you get that late rounder that turns into like a Pekka Rinne or someone of that ilk. And, it really feels like over in Russia right now, there is that capability.
And, well, he's not European, but Dustin Wolf, Calgary Flames, 7th round pick, is another recent example of a team that could really hit a gem in that we will definitely talk about him on a future episode because he is one of my favorite goalie prospects and one that I think almost was unfairly kind of screwed out of more starts of the World Juniors just because it was like one of the best goalies in the entire tournament getting beat out by the best goalie and one of the other best goalies in the tournament. It's like it wasn't very fair. So in the end, it didn't work out for him. But let's move on to some of our other topics for today. Connor Bedard. Whoa. He's having one of the best rookie seasons we've ever seen in the CHL. For reference, Connor McDavid, as a 15-year-old, has had 66 points in 63 games. If we use that same sample size, and we can't necessarily do that just solely because of it's a shorter season, but Bedard is looking at 63 goals and 113 points in that same run, which, nearly double of what McDavid was able to do. Yeah. How good is this kid going to be? We know he's going to be one of the top picks for sure at the 2023 NHL draft. I know Matthew Michkov might be like, hey, don't forget about me. And we did talk about him in the last episode, so look that up if you want to hear our thoughts on him. But Bedard right now, he's unstoppable.
He really is. And the thing that gets me from watching his games, particularly in his debut game, is he's getting a lot of these goals unassisted. Mm-hmm. He's literally doing it himself. And, Regina is rebuilding, so they don't have a lot of scoring power right now. And obviously they're going to build around Bedard. And I would also suspect that what we see sort of next year and even the year after is, they try to hit some home runs with their import picks, where you could really get somebody to play with Bedard that can be, sort of on his level or close to it, in an older prospect. But, the hands, the vision, the creativity, he's pretty quick out there. He has all the elements. Right now, I think he's listed at 5'10". He's in the 5'10", 5'9" range. Obviously McDavid's a little bit bigger than that, and nobody skates like McDavid. No. But you cannot ignore what Connor Bedard is doing, because it's really good competition that he's playing against. And, I suppose the X factor is this is a weird shortened season. A lot of the players in the dub hadn't played real games in like 12, even 13 months. Bedard did get in some games with HV71's junior program earlier this season. He went over to Sweden, so he did have a couple of reps, but it was a while ago.
He was good. He was good. 4 points at the
and he was good. Yeah, and he made some crazy moves there too. But I just feel like we shouldn't underestimate kids when they show this kind of promise, because there will eventually be a next one. Like we had this conversation with Sidney Crosby, we had it with Connor McDavid, and I'm sure if you look back, there will be people that say like, oh, you can't say McDavid's going to be as good as Crosby, or oh, you can't say Crosby's going to be as good as Lindros or whoever you want to say before that, or Tavares, or well, Tavares is younger than Crosby. Tavares, is he really going to be the next big thing? Well, eventually these guys do turn out sometimes. McDavid became McDavid, Crosby became Crosby. I think Bedard is sort of on that level. And again, that draft class is going to be really interesting, because you got Michkov. You also have Adam Fantilli, who, I just talked to a scout about him, and he was like, he's a freak, like athletically. He's incredible. The size, the skating, it's amazing. And he's already putting up points in the USHL despite being so young. So yeah, 2023 is going to be bonkers, and I can't wait.
The thing about top prospects is it's like when a player is so good, you do hear about him at an early age. And I believe it was when he was 12 years old when the first, when Ken wrote a story about Bedard being like the star prospect with 12 years old, which I think so.
I had him first. I interviewed him first.
Okay. There you go. So you got him first. All right. So
at Joe Quinn's camp. Which is always a fun time, because
that's when we always get to see the fun prospects that are all like, oh my gosh, you got like an all-star of 14, 15, 16-year-olds, and they're all going to be like superstars. It's going to be great. But the one thing that I was wondering is, there was a topic on Twitter, and I know Twitter can be a dangerous place when it comes to prospects, but talking about like if you were to look down the line, who's going to be the better prospect, Shane Wright or Connor Bedard? And you got one who's the likely number one pick for the 2022 draft, and one that's the likely number one pick for the 2023 draft. And you look at those two guys, and maybe it's just because we haven't seen Shane Wright play this year because the OHL hasn't been around. So we have to kind of rely on recency bias in this point. But it's like, it's almost like the attention is shifting to like, I would rather pick Bedard over Wright, but I don't know. It's like there's still a chance, like even with the new draft lottery rules, there's still a chance a team could end up with both of them in the draft, which would be absolutely stupid. But like, I guess, is it too early to really see which one might be the one with the most potential?
Yeah, and again, like when you think about NHL potential, like Shane Wright is a bit bigger. And I almost wonder if he's going to be like a Nathan McKinnon type. Like he's already strong and powerful, and obviously, CHL Rookie of the Year, led the Kingston Frontenacs in scoring, elevated the games of Zayd Wisdom and Martin Chromiak as line mates. And both of those players are really good. Mm-hmm. Zayd Wisdom has been lighting up the AHL as a teenager, which is very impressive. Whereas, Bedard, it's more like pure skill right now. But we've got years before we need to sort of have a referendum on this. And I would say, just enjoy it. Like if your team gets either of them, like they are game-changing players. Like if you were in a rebuild and you are missing that key cornerstone piece, Shane Wright can be that piece. Connor Bedard can be that piece. And I think that's very exciting.
And I know there'll be some people that are saying like, oh, we hear this every year, a game-changing piece. As well, like if you get the first overall pick, the odds are that player's going to be pretty solid. But we're talking like 2022, 2023 is like you're getting like a franchise changer. And also, I do feel bad for people out west that didn't kind of get to see what a full season of Connor Bedard, Riley Heidt, and Braden Yeager. Like they're not going to get the full like slate of games they possibly could have got out of these guys in their junior careers, and that was a really damn strong WHL draft. So
yeah, however, there is the benefit because Yeager and Height did not get exceptional status, so in a normal season they wouldn't be playing in the WHL right now. Like maybe in a normal season they might have gotten sort of 5-6 games and then they would have gone back to Saskatoon. But Yeager, because he's got no team to go back to, he's been with Moose Jaw and he's looked really good too. Height, his season hasn't quite started yet because he's out in BC, but the gauntlet has been thrown down for the number 2 overall pick in the WHL draft.
It's just so much fun. That draft was so good, and it's again, it's too bad that everything's kind of gone on. But you do bring up a good point there. Now let's talk about a tournament. The NCAA, essentially, they call it a tournament. It's not March Madness, but it all leads down to the Frozen Four. Let's talk about some of the top prospects to watch. So, who are the guys that you're keeping an eye on specifically?
Well, it's going to be a very fun tournament because you got some marquee programs in there and a lot of very good prospects this year. So I'll start off with the number 1 seed, North Dakota. The Fighting Hawks have a ton of talent, but I'll just sort of mention 2 because we got a lot of players to go through. Shane Pinto, amazing two-way center, defensive forward of the year in the conference, and put up a ton of points. He's an Ottawa Senators prospect, and he will be joined by his fellow Senators prospect, Jake Sanderson, who obviously very high pick in 2020. He's a defenseman. He has really improved as his freshman season has gone on. And, I know some college observers have said, he's been one of their best players of late. So you've got that 1-2 punch with North Dakota, in the Ottawa system, 1 center, 1 defenseman. And, I expect the Fighting Hawks are going to go pretty far. So it'll be good exposure for those 2. And then, of course, Michigan, who's been sort of up and down this year, but they have so much great young potential. And, I have to start with the triumvirate of 2021 draft prospects, Owen Power, the great big defenseman who is likely going to go first overall at this point.
Check out hockeynews.com for an article about him today.
There you go. Stephen was on top of that. Yeah. They got Matty Beniers, who was so good for Team USA at the World Juniors en route to gold. He's that amazing two-way center. And then you got Kent Johnson, just a very dynamic center/winger at this point, who's just so talented and, I would say aggressive in an offensive sense. He's not like a big physical guy, but, he really sort of pushes defenders with his moves. So all 3 of them I would expect are going to go top 10. There's even the possibility they could even all go top 5, depending on how things shake out. Although I think it's probably going to be more kind of like top 6 or 7 when all is said and done. And then on top of that, Michigan has Cam York. They have Thomas Bortolo. They have Brendan Brisson. Like it's just sort of a wealth of prospects. And, if they can put it together, I think they can make a pretty good run, but it's going to be very difficult. They're not in a fun bracket. So you might have to enjoy them early on. Next, another Big Ten team, the Wisconsin Badgers, and, Cole Caulfield. What can you say? Leading scorer in the nation, Montreal Canadiens prospect. He can score a goal if you give him like a 2-inch window in that net. He will find it. He is a fantastic sniper, and he'll be crucial to the Badgers' attack, as will Dylan Holloway, the Edmonton Oilers first rounder, who has had a very nice season. Went to the World Juniors with Canada, so it was kind of interrupted there, but he's put up a ton of points while he's been in the lineup for the Badgers. He gives him speed, he gives him size. So a couple of good players from Wisconsin to look at there. Heading over to Boston College, another team that really wants to do damage here. And, they're in the right window for this. They're not too young, and they still have a lot of elite talent. So you got Alex Newhook, the Colorado Avalanche pick, fantastic center, so talented, plays a good two-way game. You got Matt Boldy, the Minnesota Wild first rounder, who, I mean, he's been great. I would say the first half of his freshman year, he kind of struggled.
Mm-hmm.
Second half, he found his game. And, in his sophomore year, he's been excellent. He was great for Team USA at the World Juniors. So Boldy, obviously, continuing on the ascent. And then, of course, in net, you have Spencer Knight, who Stephen alluded to earlier in the podcast, best goalie at the World Juniors. Overall, sort of won that duel at the end against Devin Levi of Canada. Spencer Knight, the Florida Panthers prospect, big, poised, athletic. He's just everything you want in a goaltender. And, for me, that's a big thing in this tournament is, do you have the goaltending? Because you might have to have your netminder steal a game along the way. Boston College has it because they got Spencer Knight. And then St. Cloud State, they have Viti Miettinen, who has been an amazing freshman. Toronto Maple Leafs pick, obviously out of Finland. He has really paced the Huskies, and it'll be fun to see what he can do in his Frozen Four, because the last time the Huskies were in the tournament, they got upset in the first round by American International. So they're going to want some revenge there, and it'll be fun to see if they can do it. And finally, I'm going to talk about Boston University, another team that, they didn't actually play a ton of games this year because of COVID protocols, particularly early. There was a lot of sort of just the campus in general. So they only played 15 games. So to me, they're a bit of a wild card. But they have David Ferentz, the Nashville pick, who, offensive defenseman, has just been ringing up the points this year for the Terriers. And, this will probably be his last kick at the can. So, he's going to want to, go for it all. And then you got Alex Vlasic, the Chicago Blackhawks pick, big defenseman, but he has really unlocked his offensive side. And I think we were talking about him the other week on the podcast as well. To me, he has been one of the most pleasant surprises, just the way he's elevated his game this season at BU. And finally, again, speaking about goaltenders, Drew Commesso, the Chicago Blackhawks pick, the goaltender for the Terriers, is really coming on strong as a freshman. And again, if he can steal them a game or two, then all of a sudden you got that confidence, and it's not that long a tournament. Goaltending can make a big difference. And so I think, Commesso will be one to watch, but because if he can stay in gear, then the Terriers are going to be a pretty tough out.
If you had $100 million, I don't know if you do or not, but if you had $100 million and you had to pick one team to go all the way here, what's your pick?
You know what? If I kind of have a hunch, and I mean, it's not completely out of left field because they're a pretty high seed. I feel like this is the year for the University of Minnesota Golden Gophers. Yeah. So goaltending, check mark. They get Jack LaFontaine, who you and I are familiar with from his OJHL days with the Georgetown Raiders. He's got a ton of experience, and, he's gone through a lot of adversity in his career. He started off with the Michigan Wolverines and, transferred, played a year in Penticton in the BCHL, and he's been great for the Gophers. So they've got the goaltender. And then you look at the defense core, Brock Faber, Ryan Johnson, Jackson Lacombe, they have a lot of guys back there that really fit well together and bring offense from the blue line, bring a lot of mobility. So I like what they got there. And then up front, you've got some veteran guys. You got some big guys. You got Sammy Walker, the Tampa Bay pick. You got Sampo Ranta, the Colorado pick. You got Blake McLaughlin, the Anaheim pick, or McLaughlin, I think it might be. But anyways, they roll deep. And Minnesota hasn't won the national championship in, I believe, 17 years. And that does not sit well in Gopher country. So I think even though North Dakota is the number one seed, and I think it's going to be a North Dakota-Minnesota final, I think the Gophers, I feel it might be their year.
All right. So if you have $100 million to bet, make sure you listen to exactly what Ryan said. I do not recommend putting $100 million down on a college hockey game. I'm not even sure if you can. That's
maybe
even
Bitcoin.
If you have $100 million worth of Bitcoin, oh my gosh, wow, can I have some? But that'd be really nice. It's funny. I remember when Bitcoin first came out, I'm like, I should invest in this. Wait a minute, I'm like 12. That's not a good idea. I'd be really rich right now if I was. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about Team Canada Andre Tourigny is going to be their coach for a lot of different things, at different levels for Hockey Canada. And we see this for like teams like United States, Russia, Sweden, where they'll have a coach that sticks around and is involved in a lot of aspects of the national team. And that's really good for the development side of things. But then he kind of gets the chance to act as a scout too, which is very good for when you're picking the World Junior team or when you're dealing with things like that. So what type of impact do you see him having? I know he's of all of Team Canada coaches, he's always one of the most fun ones to talk to because he's just so like laid back, but he'll be sarcastic. He'll be fun. He won't be snarky. He's got the fun side about him. So what type of impact do you think he'll bring to Hockey Canada?
Well, I love this move. And you're right. Tourigny, he's a great coach. He's great to deal with. But then, you look at his history with the Ottawa 67s, and he really gets players to play the right way. And, the 67s have been really good at developing players and finding talent. And, shout out to GM James Boyd as well. He's done a great job getting guys like Marco Rossi and, finding Jack Quinn, 2 first rounders from 2020. And they've had a ton of guys before that as well. But, what I like about Tourigny is that, he is really dialed in with his teams. And we saw that with Canada at the World Juniors this year. Yeah, they lost in the gold medal game, but they lost to an incredible American squad that was also well coached by Nate Lehman. That was a toss-up game, right? If you play 10 times, I'm sure each team wins 5. So I don't worry about that at all. Tourigny, it gives Team Canada some consistency. And, we've seen in the past, I would say decade or so, that Canada has really locked on to a certain way of playing internationally that's been very successful, where it's puck possession hockey, really fast, pushing the pace. And, we saw at the World Cup of hockey where obviously they were pretty dominant. And, at the Olympics, when there was NHLers, they were dominant. And we've seen that from some of the World Junior teams as well. So for Tourigny, it allows him to concentrate on a particular style and get different experiences. He's going to be at the World Championship. He's going to be at the Olympics as an assistant. And then at the next World Championship, I believe he's going to be the head coach. So not only is he going to be the head coach of the World Juniors next year, but he's got all these other different experiences. And, the ability to just bounce ideas off the different coaches that will be coming in as either his head coach or his assistant coach, I think is very valuable. And, working with guys like Alan Millar, who's now with Hockey Canada, sort of full-time, I think that's going to be very good for just the overall landscape of Canadian international hockey.
Like that's the thing for Canada's national team. Obviously, they're strong at pretty much any level they participate in, but it always takes them a little bit to kind of figure out what they're doing. They're the coach that's focused on other things, all of a sudden getting thrown in and say, "Boo, do this, come on, right now," and that's not easy. This year was an even tougher challenge for the World Juniors because you had that it was supposed to be a month long in training camp, and then they lost 2 weeks, and then they're like, "Well, we got to cut players that we haven't even seen play at this point or seen very little of," and it's like none of that was easy. But this is a guy that clearly Hockey Canada really likes, that they're putting in a role like this. But it's not just working with the young players at the World Juniors, but you're working on the men's side of things. And, his bread and butter has been junior hockey and finding those guys. But now the fact that they're willing to put him there on both the Olympics and World Championship side on with that's big because you don't typically see that. You like often the coach that you see at the World Championship is a coach that's pretty much every time is a coach that's coaching a team that either isn't in the playoffs or they don't have a job at all. So they've kind of got that. And now you got someone who could stick around for all these teams that could maybe evaluate those players from the World Championship for the Olympics. So it is something I kind of hope we do see kind of long-term and that stability.
Yeah, I agree. And, we've seen it with other programs. Roger Ronberg was doing it with Sweden, and now, Thomas Monton is the full-time head coach of the under-20 team. Obviously, Valery Bragin for years was always the Russian World Junior coach, and Russia had a great amount of consistency. I mean, they won a lot of medals during that time. They weren't always gold. They were always in the mix, and you always knew what the Russian team was going to be like. They were going to be a veteran World Junior squad in terms of like heavy on 19-year-olds. They were going to be very defensively sound. and sort of built from the back out. And it really worked for them. They were pretty much always on the podium up until recently. And I think a lot of the credit goes to Bragan and the Russian Brain Trust to say, let's have some consistency here.
All right, so I'm excited to see what happens here with Team Canada. Now we're going south of the border once again to talk about Luke Hughes. I meant to talk about him earlier. I completely missed that. My apologies. But he's out for the year. And will this hurt his draft standing, do you think? And I'm going to go off and say no, I don't, because he still played a lot of games this year, and we know he's been one of the top prospects for this draft for quite a bit. So I don't think this is going to hurt him too much. But what are your thoughts there?
I agree with you. I think that, Luke Hughes has already shown everything that we need to see from him as a prospect. And yeah, it's too bad he won't be at the World Under-18s. He won't be at the All-American Prospects game. But he's already played way more games than anybody in the WHL is going to get to play this year, or the OHL for that matter. We have a pretty big book on him, and scouts already know, what you're getting in Luke Hughes. If anything, if there's any kind of silver lining in this, I mean, it's not for Luke Hughes, but for, a couple of the other guys on the NTDP, it allows them to maybe step up. So, Sean Barron's already kind of a favorite of scouts, but, Aiden Hershuk, there's a player who got off to kind of a rough start, and, he's starting to turn the corner there. But if Aiden Hershuk can start putting up some numbers and cutting down on turnovers, then all of a sudden maybe scouts say, okay, well, he stepped up when he needed to. Maybe he's worthy of, that sort of top 90 pick. Maybe he's not just going to be a good college player. Maybe there is something there that was sort of hyped up beforehand. And then, of course, some of the guys like Ty Gallagher and Ty Murchison or Ethan Strachey move up a little bit, and maybe they can get a couple more points and improve their draft stock.
All right, and our last topic before we go to the questions, QMJHL. It sounds like there's a chance there will be none of those players going to play at the U18s. What have we heard?
Yeah, I mean, that's the report out of RDS and Stéphane Leroux, is that, just because of the way the Quebec League's season has been structured, they might be keeping their players, and it's really too bad. And if I'm one of those players that's on sort of one of the lesser teams, if you will, I'm pretty discouraged by this. And I know they want to have as close to a regular season as they can, but for scouting purposes, the World Under-18s are better, just because it is best on best. It's hothouse. You're playing with better players than usual, so you can see you can make those sort of skilled elite plays, and they're going to be more completed than necessarily when you're back with your home club. From what I'm hearing, agents for players in the OHL definitely want their players at the World Under-18s. We still don't know when the OHL is even starting or if it will start. Yes. And then at WHL, I was talking to a GM the other day who said, yeah, if Canada wants one of my players, they can have him. Like, I know it's a great opportunity. It's okay if they miss games with our club team. This is a super important year for these kids, and their window to be scouted is already so small. So, it looks like it's going to be kind of an all OHL, WHL team right now. I don't know if they pull a couple of guys from the USHL that would be eligible, or even the junior A ranks. It's really hard to say at this point because so much is up in the air. But if the Quebec League kids don't go, it would be kind of a shame, because I think we would have seen guys like Joshua Waugh and maybe Isaac Beliveau or Zach Dean. Obviously depending on how everything shook out with the schedule and whatever playoffs they could have had or will have. So, I mean, there's certainly candidates, and unfortunately, it sounds like we might not see them.
That's too bad, because this is the one thing I always say when it comes to these international tournaments. It's, at the U18 level, this might be the only time some of these guys ever get a chance to play for their country. And because it gets harder to make it when you get to the U20 level, because you're not just dealing with the 1 year age group, you're dealing with quite a few players. So that is that for the questions, or for the topics. I want to move on to the questions. And the first one we have is from James Campbell, who asks, is Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen going to save the Sabres? Right now, the Buffalo Sabres need somebody. Now, he's not going to be the savior this year, but this is something where we've talked before. Linus Ullmark is a good goalie. I'm not convinced he's a starting goalie in any significant manner. They're going to need someone who's going to be that savior. And Luukkonen came in as this really strong goalie in the OHL, was looking fantastic. And it's like, this is going to be the guy. Some of the hype has kind of died off a little bit since he's gone to the AHL. Dustin Tokarski's is kind of, he only had a small sample size, but definitely performed a little bit better. But Tokarski's also a long time pro hockey player. He's played in the playoffs before in the NHL, so it's not like he's a young rookie. So do you think this is the guy that's going to be able to save the Sabres, though?
Well, I think that he certainly still has that potential. And, he's got a 5-2-1 record, 904 save percentage so far. And, that doesn't sound great, but last year, I think he had 10 appearances and he had an 874 save percentage. So he's doing slightly better. And he is still super young. He's a 1999 birthday. So in goaltender years, like, he is still in his infancy. I mean, it's crucial for Buffalo not to rush him because he has a lot of potential. He's got the size, he's got the pedigree. You don't want to wreck him. So if he spends this year in Rochester, even if he spends next year in Rochester, that's probably the best thing for him. The Sabres, I think they kind of just need to limp along. If they go with Ullmark and then maybe they grab somebody else in the offseason that's a veteran to just sort of stabilize their crease, that's probably not the worst idea. But yeah, in terms of Luukkonen, I still believe in him. I think it's too early to say, and I still like his tools.
All right. Next question is from Nicholas Nelson, who asks, what type of player is Brandt Clarke going to be in the NHL? And he had a fantastic season over in Slovakia. I believe he made the league all-star team today. So what type of player do you see Brandt Clarke being?
Well, he's obviously going to be a very good offensively inclined defenseman. I think he had 15 points in 26 games for Novi Zamki, and that was a team that really had trouble scoring. So once he sort of took hold and got used to the big ice and got used to, his teammates, he really started putting up some nice numbers. It's the vision, it's the big shot, it's the power play ability. Again, I don't like comparisons. Like, I don't think like Cale Makar quite works because Makar is more of a playmaker than he is a shooter. Like maybe like John Carlson is a guy that's got the big shot and the power play ability. But I'll just say, Brandt Clarke, he projects to be a top pairing defenseman that can really move the puck up the ice. And, he's the best prospect in the OHL this year. And I think he's going to be, in that sort of 5 to 10 range right now. I still am holding on to the belief. I think that he's probably going to be the best prospect from this draft. I know a lot of people don't agree with me, but this is a guy that just watching him play, even from a young age, is like, there's just something where if you unlock him, if you give him the right players to pass to, he's going to make things work. And the one thing was watching him play a couple times in Slovakia and watching him play with Slater Doggett, who actually, he's kind of like an unknown name, but he's from Oakville and actually grew up a few streets away from me. So that's kind of cool. But just watching kind of just the way that he would feed the best players on the ice, it's like he knows what he's doing at such a young age. And he played with Shane Wright. I believe he at minor midget, I believe he had 113 points with the Don Mills Flyers, which is just unbelievable. But at the same time, maybe it's because I'm looking at a guy like Ryan Merkley and I'm still holding on for hope just because of how good he was at just the younger age. And that, years down the line, it's what he did at 16, 17 doesn't matter as much, but I think that it was just impressive to see what he could do. And I still think Clark's got a lot of offensive potential. He's not going to be someone who's going to throw a ton of hits around, and I don't necessarily love him along on the boards, but he's got the offensive skill set where I like watching him a lot. So we'll see. I also think right now, if I'm actually picking number one, I'm going Jesper Wallstead, but I don't think a goalie is going to go number one. So I just think he'll be the best player. I think this is going to be almost a 2012, I believe it was when Vasilevsky got drafted, where he was like, clearly the star. All right. Yeah. Maddie Hartwick, our final question of the episode.
With Rodion Amirov's season coming to an end, is the AHL a good fit for him moving forward? And what type of player do you envision him becoming? I'm assuming moving forward, we're just talking like in the near future type thing.
Yeah, and his contract is over in April, and his team is done. So hypothetically, he could come over to the AHL if Toronto signs him once that contract is done. To me, I don't mind if it's next year. If you want to sort of give the kid a break, or just have the kid sort of come over and start to get used to the North American culture. But I think it would be very good for him to play maybe a full season with the Toronto Marlies, where he can get used to just the North American game. It's faster, it's more physical. You don't have as much time and space as you do on the bigger ice surfaces. And I know the KHL doesn't necessarily play on the Olympic ice, but I think just getting used to the style over here will be very crucial. Very bright future ahead of him because he has amazing hands. He has excellent vision. He's definitely a top six forward. He's a guy that you put on the line with other skill guys and you just watch them work. And I thought he was very good for Russia at the World Juniors. And I think he would be a very good AHL player, probably fairly quickly. And, I think Toronto has enough Russians in their system that he can kind of, have a bit of a soft landing where, there will be some guys that speak his language. And, even if he's with the Marlies and they're with the Leafs, or if they're all with the Marlies, the two teams geographically are so close within the city and the rinks that,